The first time I insisted he needed to step up, really insisted, I remember the feeling before I said anything. That tightness in my chest. That calculation running in the background. Is it worth it? What will happen if I say this? What will happen if I don't? I said it anyway. And what came back wasn't help. It wasn't even a real response. It was as if I hadn't spoken at all. He just kept doing what he always did. And then came the anger. And then came the manipulation. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had done something unfamiliar. I had stopped being who the system needed me to be, and the system pushed back. Welcome to The Fan in the Window, interrupting what we inherit. I'm Tressa Bell. This podcast is about trauma, nervous systems, generational patterns, and the complicated, imperfect work of healing. Today's episode is called When You Change and the System Doesn't. Last week I talked about the roles we take on in our families. The responsible one, the peacekeeper, the protector, the invisible one, the performer, the mascot. Today I want to talk about what happens when you try to put that role down. Because here is what nobody tells you. Changing is only half the work. The other half is surviving what comes back at you when you do. Before I go further, I want to say something clearly. This podcast is not therapy. It's not medical advice. It is not psychological treatment. I am not your therapist. Some episodes include themes related to trauma, family instability, and emotional harm. Please listen at your own pace. If anything in this episode brings up strong feelings or memories, please take care of yourself and reach out for support. In the U.S., you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're outside the U.S., you can find international hotlines at findahelpline.com. You don't have to navigate this alone. This space is about awareness, not diagnosis. In the last episode, I gave you a question to sit with. What role did you play in your family growing up? And where do you still see that role showing up today? Maybe you sat with it. Maybe you recognized yourself. Maybe the recognition was uncomfortable. Once you see the role, once you understand what it cost you and why you took it on, you want to change. You want to stop being the one who holds everything. You want to stop smoothing things over when they deserve to be named. You want to ask for help, to take up space, to say no without explaining yourself for 20 minutes afterwards. And then you try, and the people around you lose their minds. Murray Bowen, whose work on family systems I've referenced before, described something he called differentiation of self. It refers to a person's ability to maintain a clear sense of who they are while still staying connected to the people they love. But here's what Bowen also understood, and what researchers in family systems have continued to confirm. When one person in a system begins to differentiate, the system does not applaud. The system applies pressure to get that person to return to their familiar function. Bowen called this the family projection process, the way systems move to maintain their emotional balance by pulling members back into their assigned roles. In plain language, when you change, the people around you feel destabilized, and they will, often without knowing they're doing it, do whatever they can to restabilize things. By ignoring the change, by questioning it, by getting angry, by making you feel like you are the problem. I tried at work. I had always been a yes person, always available, always willing, always the one you could count on to take on one more thing. I decided to practice saying no. Not dramatically, not with a speech. Just, no, I cannot take that on right now. What came back wasn't anger. It was something quieter, and in some ways more cutting. Suddenly, I wasn't giving all I could. Suddenly, there were questions about my commitment. Suddenly, I was the problem. Not because my work had changed, but because my availability had. What I know now that I didn't know then is that my yes-ness had become part of the system. My willingness to absorb extra weight was load-bearing in that environment. When I stopped, the system wobbled, and the system blamed me for the wobble. Clinical psychologist Lindsey Gibson writes that freedom from unhealthy roles starts within each of us, not in our interactions and confrontations with others. I want to sit with that for a moment because I think it's easy to misread. She's not saying don't confront. She's not saying don't have the hard conversation. She's saying the change has to be rooted in you first. Because if the only reason you're changing is to get a different response from the people around you, you're still organized around them. You've just changed the strategy. The role is still running the show. Real change, the kind that holds, comes from the inside out. From deciding that you are allowed to want different things, regardless of whether someone else adjusts. I tried with my family of origin, and what I got was something I wasn't entirely prepared for. Not anger, not confrontation. They just kept going. As if I hadn't said anything. As if I hadn't shifted. As if the version of me that had always played the role was the only version they could see. There is something disorienting about that kind of response. Anger you can work with. Silence, invisibility, being simply not registered. That takes something out of you. I was not always good at holding the line. I'll be honest about that. Sometimes I felt the pressure of their not responding, and I slipped back. Back into the familiar. Back into the role. Because something in my nervous system could not tolerate the distance. That is not weakness. That is a nervous system doing what nervous systems do, seeking safety. And for many of us, the familiar role, even when it hurts, feels safer than the unknown of being different. Dr. Steven Porges, whose work on the nervous system has shaped much of what we now understand about trauma responses, describes how our bodies are constantly scanning for safety. He calls it neuroception, the way our nervous system detects threat or safety before our conscious mind has registered what's happening. When you change, when you step out of the role, the people around you experience a shift in their environment. And that shift can register as threat, not because you have harmed them, but because their nervous systems had organized around a version of you that no longer exists in the same way. Their pushback is often not a conscious choice. It's a nervous system response. It's their system trying to return to equilibrium. That does not mean you have to stop changing, but it does mean that you can stop taking it personally. Here is the part I didn't expect. The hardest pushback didn't come from the outside. It came from me. Even now, with everything I know clinically and with all the healing I've done, I still feel it. When my kids ask me to watch the grandchildren and I have plans, real plans, my own plans, there is a moment before I answer where the guilt shows up. Not because anything is actually wrong, not because I'm a bad grandmother or a bad mother, but because somewhere deep in my nervous system there is still a voice that says, you are not allowed to choose yourself. That voice is not the truth, but it is loud, and it has been there a long time. This is what I want you to understand about the guilt that comes when you change. It is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing something new. Guilt in this context is not a moral signal. It is a nervous system signal. It is your body telling you, this is unfamiliar. This is not what we've done before. And unfamiliar is not the same as wrong. There is research on what happens when we begin to act in ways that conflict with deeply held beliefs about who we are. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. But in the context of inherited roles, I think of it differently. It's not just a conflict between two thoughts. It's a conflict between who you are becoming and who your nervous system was trained to be. The role didn't just live in your behavior. It lived in your body, in your sense of what you deserve, in your belief about what happens if you stop being needed, if you stop managing, if you stop peacekeeping, if you stop absorbing. For many people who grew up in chaotic homes, the fear underneath the role is the fear of abandonment. If I stop being useful, will I still be loved? If I stop managing everything, will anyone stay? I'll tell you something I've noticed. It was easier for me to hold the line with my children than with almost anyone else. I think I understand why. Because I knew in my body, not just in my head, that even when they were upset with me, they wouldn't leave. That the love was not conditional on my performance. That is what secure attachment feels like. The freedom to be imperfect without fearing that imperfection will cost you everything. And for those of us who didn't grow up with that, who learned early that love came with conditions, building that trust in any relationship is part of the healing work. Here is what I want you to hear today. The pushback you get when you change is real. It is not in your head. The anger, the silence, the guilt-inducing questions, the "what is wrong with you" energy, it is real. And it does not mean that you are wrong. It means you are changing inside a system that was built around the version of you that didn't. The system will adjust, or it won't. Some systems do. Some people grow alongside you. Some relationships deepen when you finally show up as your whole self. And some systems cannot hold the change. Some people in your life only have room for the version of you that doesn't need anything. That is painful information, but it is important information. Because you cannot interrupt generational patterns by staying small enough for everyone else to stay comfortable. I want to offer you something to sit with this week. Think about a moment when you tried to step out of your role. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be as small as saying no to something you always said yes to, or asking for help when you usually don't, or choosing yourself when you usually wouldn't. What happened? What did the system do? And what did you do with the discomfort? Did you hold the line? Or did you slip back? There is no wrong answer. Slipping back is not failure. It is information about where the work still lives. And just noticing, just being able to see what happened and name it, That is already interruption. Before we close, if this feels supportive, I want to take a moment to ground. This episode can bring up a lot. The memory of trying to change and being pushed back. The guilt that comes when you choose yourself. The grief of relationships that couldn't hold your growth. So if you're able, just slow down with me for a moment. If you're driving, keep your eyes open. But if it's safe to do so, you may want to close your eyes. Notice where you are right now. Notice the surface beneath you. Your feet on the floor. The weight of your body being held. Take one slow breath in and let it out gently. Take another breath, and this time, let your exhale be a little longer than your inhale. If it feels okay, put one hand on your chest. Just let it rest there. And say to yourself gently, I am allowed to change. The resistance I feel is not a sign that I am wrong. I can hold this. Take one more slow breath. In the next episode, I want to talk about grief. Not the grief of losing a person, but the grief of letting go of a role. Because stepping out of who you were trained to be is a loss, and it deserves to be named as one. If this resonates with you, this is the work I explore more deeply in my book, The Fan in the Window. How our nervous systems carry what we inherit and how we begin interrupting those patterns for the next generation. The book is available today on Amazon. The podcast is available wherever you listen. A companion book is also in the works. Stay connected at thefaninthewindow.com. If this episode spoke to you, follow the show, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and share it with someone you know who may need it. That is how we grow this community. Thank you for being here. This is The Fan in the Window, interrupting what we inherit. This didn't start with you, but you can interrupt it.